Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Leadership Conversations with Bukky, where we explore the stories and strategies of diverse leaders shaping our world. Today, we have the incredible André Bright, who pivoted from professional dance and architecture to become a burnout prevention coach. Andre is the co-founder of Udo Health and a prevention burnout coach, as I said before, who leans on his background in architecture to create structure and break down the complicated into the simple, and his background in professional dance to seek creative ways to help clients express and connect as a remedy for burnout. He's also the host of a new podcast series, What a Relief podcast. He's passionate about people, well-being, and culture. So, Andre, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bookie. Absolute pleasure to be here.
uh, you know, you have got such a fascinating background in terms of the different contexts that
Mm.
brought you to where you are today. So can we actually start with the very first question is what led you to do what you do with creative leadership and coaching work?
So I think in each of the different phases of my life, I just followed what I enjoyed. So when I was younger, I used to draw all the time. I was the one in the back of the room just sketching. But then my mum, I think in a way to drive me away from fine art, maybe, brought my attention towards architecture as that kind of middle ground between the kind of cultural expectations back home and that kind of arty side of things.
Yeah.
So I started to look at geometric shapes, and I remember starting to pay attention to buildings and the built environment, and I just loved it. So when the options came in, I chose that. And I actually didn't start dancing until uni. So I
Wow.
started uni, and my housemate at the time was had a background in dance, and he used to dance in Pineapple and do all these competitions and things like that. And we were looking for a dance class at Loughborough Uni, couldn't find one, so we created our own. They called it, what are the student clubs? All right, so we called it Loughborough University Street Dance Society or something like that. And that was like my first. It was interesting, my first time learning dance properly, was
Mm.
also teaching it. So I don't think he knew that I had never taken a dance class before.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. So you were
So I, at
learning and teaching at the same time?
the same time, yeah, the deep end. So I would watch him do it and then go and help other people do it. And in the session, and that kind of meant my pickup game had to be really quick.
Hmm.
Uh, Took it to a competition which didn't, it was called Club Gel, and it was £100,000 cash prize, right? And the organizers ran away with the money. So the final
Oh,
never happened.
no. Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
But who the judges of that competition were a group called Bird Gang, who at the time were like the top of the league in that sense in UK. And they really liked me enough to call me later on to fill in a place when they went to Czech Republic for a competition. And
Mhm.
so if you imagine the second year of me dancing, I've done Juste Debout, which was a international dance competition, and I was with Bird Gang performing in Czech Republic, representing UK all of a sudden. The trajectory was crazy.
Yeah.
And I loved it as well. And so when I did dance, it was at that kind of level. So I was traveling with it. And the significance of that came in 2010 when there was a credit crunch and there were no architecture jobs, but I
Right.
was able to dance and travel internationally at the same time. So I was really fortunate that I had these foundations that I built and been in the right place at the right time,
I
meeting
was
the
going to
right.
say is the serendipity for that is incredible. And I think you also highlight the powerful lesson about the fact that um, if you want to enhance what you are learning in terms of your knowledge and understanding, teach it. And the fact
Yes.
that, that you were learning and then teaching so immediately that within 2 years you were representing the UK internationally. Wow.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny because it was a running joke because I just loved dance. And
Right.
so I didn't have any kind of preferences to the style. So I learned them all, right? So
Mm.
pop in, lock in, hip hop, house, breaking. And I remember there was one competition at Nottingham, and I entered in every style. I got into the final in two of them. And I remember having to do the house dance final and come off stage and come back on at stage for the hip hop final. And I remember in that moment thinking, this is ridiculous now. And let me well, practicality sense, but I just loved it. And I think my approach with dance was the same approach I had with architecture. I kind of studied it in that sense.
Mm,
So I spoke to the people who were as close to the originators of the dance style as possible to seek
mhm,
advice. I made sure that every time I went to a class, but also a club or a party or something, I looked at it as a student. So I
mhm.
paid attention to what I enjoyed about what I saw, tried to break it down, which is what I do with coaching now as well.
Right.
It's trying to find the simplest way to describe something. Occam's razor, right? The simplest solution is often the best. So I think I honed that as a skill, and it's really
Mm,
turned out to be really useful for me right now.
mhm.
Not because I'm really smart, but just because I need things to be simple for me to be able to move forward. So
Yes, and that's it's really interesting about the analytical approach you have. Not to say it's clinical, but about the fact that you understand whatever it is to its base components so that it allows you to replicate things or produce the results that you want in the most effective yet simplistic way, which I think is it's very wise, actually, very powerful.
definitely. And I learned that the hard way. So we moved from Sierra Leone to UK when I was 5, right? And I was very young, but one of my first memories of that was being in a completely new environment where I didn't know anyone. And I, funnily enough, spoke the language better than everyone else, but was the black kid. And so it was a bit of a research project for me. I had to pay attention to human behavior. I realized I wanted to be the person who was able to walk in the room and connect with anybody. So
Mm,
I identified the people who were doing that and I paid attention to what they did. And I think that was the first kind of insight into communication and human behavior and psychology and stuff. And
mhm,
I was very, obviously, I didn't have the words for that at the time, but looking
mhm.
back, that's what I was doing. I was paying attention to that and replicating what would get me the results I wanted. And I apply that to everything. So if there is someone who's doing what I want to be doing, either go to them directly or observe with a kind of analytical approach to understand what they're
Yes.
doing and then translate it to my way.
What was a moment you realized that burnout was not just a buzzword, but a crisis many high achievers quietly live with? And how did that shape your choice to build your relief framework?
Yeah, so I was in architecture at the time and I found like some of my friends who were doing coaching said I should look into it because what they were learning, they said I did naturally. So I did a course in it, got qualified with the ICF and AOEC, and then started to speak to clients and just try and help people. But at that time, there wasn't any particular niche. I was just a coach.
Mm,
Something that kept coming up with this concept of stress and how people navigate it. And what I realized very soon is that the conversation around stress online is only really the surface level. It's like that image we have of the iceberg. It's really just the tip of the iceberg that we're talking about. So taking time off is great, but people were coming back to work and feeling burnt out immediately. So that's obviously not the case. Going on a spa, for example, is great in the moment, but it doesn't necessarily stop the stressors that are affecting the stress. So I started to look at what is stress then and how does it work? And because it kept coming up so frequently, so it was not necessarily that I chose it and went after it. It's just what I saw and started to identify patterns. And then the relief framework came from looking at what are the things that people keep missing out on that needs to be done to be able to have a sustainable breakthrough from burnout. So I started to look at what was underneath the waterline. So, for example, the the resilient mindset was the R, right? So, how do we perceive things? How do we look at things in a way that they cause us stress or don't? Because you can have two people next to each other working in a team, working on the same challenge, but one will be stressed out by it and the other one wouldn't. So, what
mhm,
is the difference between those two. And I realized part of that is the mindset. How are we looking at it? Is this a challenge or an opportunity, for example? Is this could I lose my job, or is it an opportunity for promotion?
Mm.
All these things, how do we look at the world will affect how we experience stress,
Hmm.
get it into this like perfect point where it's not burnout, but it's also not a lack of motivation. It's like this perfect balance that keeps us in focus and keeps us going. And one of the things I noticed as well is that, which I'm really big on at the moment, is it's not necessarily about time, it's about energy.
Okay.
Because you'll find that you can have a day full, back to back, 9 to 7, but feel energized at the end of that day. Or you can have a day where you speak to the wrong person for 20 minutes and it'll ruin your entire afternoon.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So it's not necessarily how you're spending your time, not what you're doing, it's how you're spending it.
Mm.
Is it something that's filling you? Is it something that's recharging you? I noticed things like this idea about the difference between sleep, rest, and recovery. Three completely different things.
Right.
You can take naps and you can take sleep, but the problem might still be there physiologically. Rest is really important, but it's not necessarily recovery. If we're talking about recovery, it's things that rejuvenate you, bring back your energy,
Hmm.
because burnout isn't necessarily being lazy or just plain tired. It's deeper than that. And so to recover from it, the process needs to be deeper than that too. So a lot of the work I do is looking at using the framework is to find things like joy, which is often the first thing to disappear when it comes
Yes.
stress, right? How can we connect with our inner child and the things that we do that actually builds us up? How can we build that back? I did a workshop yesterday, actually, which was looking at the subtraction bias. So instead of looking at what we need to start doing, what can we stop doing
Yes.
that is draining our energy to give us space to do the things again that used to build energy for us? Because like if I know that I love the gym, starting to go to the gym can be another thing on top of the thing that's
That's
already.
true.
So there's a lot of things like that that I build the relief framework around. So relief as a word is something that we need when we're experiencing burnout.
Hmm.
And so little things like I mentioned, your inner alignment, your purpose and things, but you'll find that you'll be able to take more on if you're in a place of alignment. Often it's so for example, my first experience with burnout wasn't necessarily what I was doing. It shifted at a point where the thing I was doing wasn't serving me in a way anymore.
Right.
So dance used to build me up, but I found that in a specific context of commercial dance, the energy was completely different and it drained me. I had to put on a face that wasn't me. I had to perform in a certain way. I kid you not, I remember doing this audition for a music video and I asked the choreographer for advice because I wanted to get the job. It was like the biggest job I was looking for at the time. And he said, give the audience a face that will make them want to sleep with you. That's what he
What?
did, yeah. And the thing that was killing it about it is because you know that the face, the steel, the face, right? But the
Oh, look.
yeah, the look, right? But then he also pointed out that you want to, in the actual audition room, pay attention to the person with the power. Because most
Right.
people were crowding around him, but he wasn't the decision maker. The producer was.
Mm.
And so again, identifying that and realizing I needed to play a game to be able
Yes.
to get to where I needed to be just didn't work. So there was this one thing I loved all of a sudden was something that was draining me.
Mm.
That was happening within architecture, dance, even some of the social work I was doing. It was draining me because of either the people I was working with or the things I had to do to get to where I needed to go. And then all that energy change was what caused me to fall into a burnout state.
Hmm.
And so when I speak to clients and stuff, it's not just about what you're doing, because what you're doing might not be the problem. It's the energy around it. Is it
Yeah.
something that's filling you? Is it something that you wake up in the morning excited? Are you waking up early, ready to go to this thing?
Hmm.
Or are you hitting snooze because you can't face them? There've been moments where I woke up actually afraid to go to work. And moments like that really, really shot me down that that line towards burnout. So
Yeah.
yeah, when it comes to the framework, I look at ways that are kind of deeper than the top of the iceberg.
Okay, no, thank you very much for sharing that as well. And it's really interesting we say about the difference between, well, like what's it, rest, recovery, and sleep, those
Yes.
differences, as well as the subtraction bias, which I think is really interesting because we forget about, what can we actually stop doing rather
Mhm.
than piling it on, like doing something that becomes another thing that actually adds to your stress and therefore burnout. So yeah, thank you very much for actually sharing that.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go on to yeah, I'm going to go on to ask you about this expression leading on fumes. For someone who's leading on fumes, what are the first signs of burnout you encourage them to watch out for? And what immediate steps can they begin to take to reverse this drift?
That's such a powerful question because that's at the core of everything I do. Now, the thing is, we're in an information age, so people can Google this, right?
Exactly.
What I would suggest as well is pay attention to the 12 signs of burnout because there's been a lot of research done about it. And what I found that most people don't understand about burnout is that the first few stages of it is actually something that society praises us for. It's your ability to take on more.
Okay, that's
And
interesting.
so, yeah, so you'll find someone who's suddenly saying yes to everything,
Hmm.
suddenly feeling like it's their responsibility to get things across the line, even though it's someone else's workload.
Hmm.
The kind of person who is showing up for the family members, probably the firstborn, and feels like it's their responsibility because they're kind of like that gap between the children and the parents. There's those people who start to take on more. That's actually your first sign of burnout.
Right.
And it's a difficult one to manage because it's celebrated. This person becomes the reliable one, the one
Hmm.
that everyone turns to. And
Hmm.
there's even the saying where if you want something to be done, give it to the busiest person.
Which is true, which is true. Can
True.
I interrupt and then ask you a question? Because I think there is, there are times in which we can feel we can actually take on more because we've got capacity and things like that, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, so to speak. What is the difference here? What is going on beneath the surface that they're saying yes? The person is saying yes to more, they're taking on more. Is it because they feel they're expected to do so? What's going on a little bit beneath the surface? Could you share that so that it makes it clearer as to taking on more things in
Hmm.
this circumstance is completely different to the context in which you are outlining.
I would say it relates to the I of the relief framework, which is inner alignment. So it's your capacity. Are you saying yes when you really cannot afford to?
Okay.
So remember, I said that you can have a full day back to back of meetings and stuff and feel energized.
Hmm.
That's cool. You've got the capacity for that. But the challenge comes when you're still saying yes when you'll run out,
Right.
when you've got nothing left in the tank, but you feel
Right.
like you have to
Hmm.
because the world will stop without you if you
Hmm.
don't.
Hmm.
That becomes more of a psychological issue. There's something behind that that's pushing you to say yes beyond your limit.
Hmm.
There's this idea about pushing through,
Yes.
and that's when it becomes a danger. So saying yes to stuff and doing more things isn't necessarily a problem. I'm a good example of that. Like there was a point where I would be part of my day, no joke. I would wake up, I would go to work 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock. I would take the train 5 o'clock till I think 7 o'clock to go into London, train 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock, I think, and take the train back to midnight. And I'll be gassed because I'll be working on incredible projects with architecture. And then I'll bring that energy into dance, make it creative, get it out of my system. And
Mm.
then I'll just be listening to music on the way back or planning some of the stuff I was doing in Sierra Leone. Everything I was doing was giving me energy and it was
Yeah.
just fantastic. But where it changed was where I felt like I had to do those things.
Right.
When there's a rehearsal coming up for a show, but I'm tired, right? But I have to go there. When someone else hasn't done their work in a group project, but then I feel like I need to step in for them, even though
Hmm.
it's not my responsibility to.
Hmm.
But even though there's like 12 people on the team and anyone could have picked it up, right?
Right.
Those kind of things become this telltale signs that I'm starting to go towards this part of burnout, which is around stage 3, where you feel like you're responsible for everything and everyone.
Okay.
Like the first kind of project I did with burnout was I called it Ickdane. I can do anything, not everything.
Okay. Yeah.
Individually, sure,
Yeah.
you have the capacity, you have
Mm.
the skill set. But when you start to do everything for everyone and you feel like you have to, that is a sign. So that's what I would say would be the difference.
Okay. No, thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Now, decision fatigue is something else that you coach on.
Yes.
What strategies would you recommend for reducing decision fatigue while maintaining clarity, especially when every decision feels high stakes?
Okay. So I'm trying to give answers for these which aren't Google. Because
But from your experience, I mean, obviously,
yeah,
from your experience, or your insights. Exactly,
exactly.
because and you're right about the fact that people can actually Google these particular things, but that is just like it's dry information which you can. I think what we are looking for are practical things, what you've experienced or what you've seen other people experience as well, that
Yeah.
actually lends itself to a different take or a different perspective or
Mm.
different nuance and insights that would not necessarily be Googleable.
So the first thing I point out is that one thing that people don't understand about decisions is it takes brain power. And one thing that people don't understand about brain power is that your brain is a biological organism which requires energy. And one thing people don't understand about energy is the brain runs on protein. So they quite literally, when people say I'm hangry,
Yes, yes.
is a biological thing. If your brain doesn't have enough energy, it starts to run on fumes, like you mentioned before.
Yeah.
That can put you into a state which is looking for like effectively fight or flight, right? Because you're
Hmm.
running on empty and you're looking for you start to go into survival mode.
Hmm.
So you snapping at people and all that kind of stuff isn't necessarily a change in um, personality, for example. It's that you need something. The Snickers advert is a great example of that. You take the bite and you can literally feel it. The moment you take a bite, you actually start to feel better. You calm down and you're able to make to act in a way that is more conducive to you as a person. The reason why I'm pointing that out is decision fatigue and my mum, for example, she does lots of work in Sierra Leone and she did a speech at the school we fund because one of the things she was adamant about is having hot school meals for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
The reason why she said that is because it's difficult to learn if you can't think, and you can't think if your brain isn't fed energy. So when we're in decision fatigue, one of the first things to ask is, have I eaten? Have I slept? Have I hydrated? I know this sounds as a basic thing, but I cannot tell you how important this is.
Mm.
Have I eaten? Have I slept? Have I had exercise? All the things that your body needs so it can run on its optimal. And then you can think about the actual decisions itself.
Mhm.
One of the things for me that I like is I actually got this from I think it was James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is I try and reduce the amount of decisions I need to make in a day. So I used to have the same lunch for years because it was just one less decision to make. Yeah, so you got people like Steve Jobs who have that black black polo neck and the blue jeans, right? And that's because that's one less decision for them to make. So if you imagine you've got capacity for 100 decisions a
Mm.
day,
Mhm.
right? And you use eight of them or 20 of them, for example, on things that you didn't really need to,
Right.
then it means that you've only got 80 left for the important stuff. So decision fatigue can sometimes come from one, how many decisions you made, and two, not all decisions are made equal. Some decisions actually take time and
Okay.
thought. And again, going back to your capacity in terms of your brain power, there's some decisions where you don't need to think about. There's very little um, consequence if it's a wrong decision.
Hmm.
But for you who are what's the word I'm looking for? Overthinkers, for example, you'll be spending all day on one decision, and that can drain you out, right? Unless you have a system to decide. Because one of the things that I've realized is sometimes the decision is more draining than the actual action.
Yes, that's
And the
true.
action itself can you can recover from an action a lot of the time. I make the decision and I chose the wrong one. Okay, cool. So the next time I'll make a different decision. Or let's say, for example, I make a decision to hire this person on my team.
Mm,
Okay. Oh, okay. They've joined and actually it's not working. Okay. So now we need to find somebody else, right? Make a different decision.
hmm.
Or I can spend months making decision on this first person, right? And it can still end up wrong because only the action is going to tell us whether it was right or wrong.
Right.
And so those are the things that I would say about decision fatigue, because a lot of people suffer from it because it drains the energy so much. Is one, sort out your physical first. Have you eaten, slept, hydrated, had exercise so that you're in a state where you're in the strongest position to make the decision? And then what decisions capacity do you have? And then what kind of decisions are you making?
Hmm.
A lot of the times we make decisions which are out of our control and or we try and make decisions that are actually out of our control, right? So I I want somebody to act a certain way. That's not in my control. I can
Yeah.
help my actions, but I'm going to spend all day thinking about what they might do or might say. That's completely out of my control. And one of the last thing I would say as well when it comes to decision fatigue is actually follow through. I think the problem is we stop in the middle of the tunnel. We stop at the decision. We don't think about what comes after that,
Okay,
right?
interesting.
So think about it. So, okay, if I was to do this, what would happen then? What is the worst case scenario? What could I do if that worst case scenario would happen? If I have a plan for that worst, my mom always says, prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, great saying. Yeah.
Exactly. If I have a preparation, if I have a plan for what could go wrong,
Hmm.
then I know I can handle it.
Hmm.
Which means that I don't need to spend too much time on the decision because if it goes wrong, I know what I will do. The problem is that we don't spend enough time thinking about that solution so that we panic when it actually arrives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really powerful point as well about spending time. This is what some of the things I do with some of the leaders I work with as part of the
Mm,
leadership coaching I offer in terms of thinking through options, like plan A, plan B, plan C, just in case. Because I think that when you feel ill prepared or you're on the hop, that adds unintentional stress as well because you're having to make another decision because things didn't actually work out as you expected. But thank you very much. And also for really, again, I love this where you actually break it down into the fact that to make a decision, like you need energy in order to have energy, like and the brain and things like that, and just going down to the physical basics
mm.
before you can actually it provides the foundation before you can then actually look at the mechanics of the decision itself. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. It's really, really
Just
good.
just to complete that thought, think about it in our own lives, right? Think about the decisions we make when we're hungry, when we're tired, when we're
Yes,
triggered into anger, when we're upset. Those decisions are very rarely good for our long term
correct.
because we're in our fight or flight mode.
Mm,
So the idea is physiologically, we want to get into a state. And that's one of the reasons why, when it comes to coaching, I usually start with a grounding exercise, breathing, or something like that to regulate your nervous system to get you into a state of calm so that you can think, so that you can make decisions, so that you can behave or control yourself before we look at anything else.
That segues nicely into our next question. In your VIP reset and rewire coaching package, you talk about a leadership nervous system mapping. Can
Mm.
you explain what this means, how it works, and why it's so critical for leading with calm instead of stress? Now, I know you touched upon it beforehand, but could you expand upon that, please?
Yeah, and going back to what I said earlier, a lot of this stuff is Googleable, but the way I look at it is, and I use appreciative inquiry quite a lot.
Mhm.
I ask you, the first thing I'll ask is when you are in fight or flight mode, what usually works? What we don't realize and we don't really reflect on enough, and this is a whole other conversation, giving ourselves time to reflect is so
Mm.
important. But what we don't focus on enough is what actually works. There have been times when you've been stressed. There have been times when you've been like falling towards burnout. There have been times when you've been in panic state or suffering from anxiety, and your body has natural ways to counter that.
Okay.
And we don't pay attention. Little things like your leg might shake when you feel your energy rising. That's your body trying to shake off the physiological things that are happening internally. You
Mhm.
might press your hands together. You might need to get out into the open to take some deep breaths. Some people go smoking, right? There's nicotine, yes, but there's deep breaths involved in that too.
Mm,
Right. So, what are the things that you naturally get drawn to do that work for you to calm down your nervous system? Because when you're in fight or flight, it's your sympathetic nervous system. And in that mode, you're looking at the immediate challenge. And
right.
the way I would say is that there was a guy who said that when you are when you're healthy, you have 1,000 problems. When you are sick, you have one problem, and that is your health, right? So when you're sick or when you're in that state, your body's looking at that one thing. How can I solve this one problem?
Mhm.
You may have your bills to pay. You may have this relationship issue that's going on. You may have your boss that's giving you whatever. But if you're in a panicked state, your fight or flight, your body's going to choose what it's going to focus on for you. So the nervous system remapping is looking at, first of all, what triggers you,
Yeah.
what kind of things tend to trigger you, what happens in your body, how does that manifest, short and long term,
Mm,
and then it's what do we actually do short and long term to help those things. So what do I do in the moment, and what do I do long term? So long term might be things like, what habits do I have? Do I have a gym membership that I actually use? Who do I have around me that tends to calm my nerves? One of the things that I find interesting is like co-regulation.
okay.
So, for example, hugs.
Mm,
It's so simple, but you'll notice it. There'll be someone in your life where when you get a hug from them,
yeah.
right? And sometimes you don't need to have a physical contact, just having them in the room. And what you'll find is that a lot of the time we don't recognize these as tools that our body's naturally drawn to
Right.
help us regulate until you have the wedding for it. So that remapping exercise is taking you through a whole workshop where we look at those different elements and realize what you've naturally been doing and give
Hmm.
attention to it. Because
Yeah.
I think the risk is that we'll Google it, we'll chat GPT it, and we'll find these things that the world will tell us to do that will be great for them,
Yes.
not actually work for you. But going back to our subtraction bias, would feel like something I need to do and an extra thing I need to start doing. When actually your body's naturally doing stuff that works for you already, you just
Mm.
haven't noticed.
Yeah, and that's very, very powerful because it goes back to what you said earlier about starting with self and understanding self and knowing thyself. And I think, when we do that, and you know, it can take a while to do this. And it's going to be, and that will lead me on to my next question actually about why it can actually take a while to do this and why we may not even be aware about what works best for us in the first instance.
Yeah.
Now, mental and emotional resilience often involves dealing with past wounds. It could be like around beliefs, pressure, expectations. How much of your work deals with mindset and belief work? And what's an example of how reframing or belief work has transformed a client's leadership capacity?
Yeah, this is a great questions. I'm loving these actually.
Thank you.
So the first thing is resilience. I think resilience has a bad rap. I think when people hear the term resilience, they think about the troubles that people will have to go through. And an example of exactly what you're talking about is reframing, right? For me, resilience is not necessarily the challenge, it's the recovery. How big is the gap between the chaos and the recovery? How big is that gap? So for some people who experience the same thing, that gap might be a day. For someone else, that might be 3 months. For someone else, it might be 3 years. And then the question is, what is it about the individual that is having an impact on that duration of recovery? Is it the tools they have, the people they have around them? Is it the way they're looking at things, right? Like we mentioned before, right? All those things have an effect on your resilience. And once you realize that, it's not, and here's the trick I find. We're not shortening that distance so that you can add more stuff on top.
Yeah, good points. Good
Right.
point.
So, and I think that's the challenge. People are thinking, especially in organizations, they don't want to seem resistant. because they feel like it means that someone else is going to add loads on top. Remember, giving it to the busiest person,
Yes.
when actually resilience is actually just about you. I'll give you an example. For me, there was a point where we were given 2 days to turn around these drawings. 2 days. 2 days to have a look at the site, look at the entry and exit, look at disabled access, look at foot flow, look at deliveries, all these kind of stuff, and create a plausible solution for this site,
Ooh,
right?
in two
The
days.
stress in
Oh,
2 days. And sometimes you'll only have the address. So they wouldn't give you any drawings. You'd have to find that from the council website. You'd have to go onto Google to be able to find pictures and images so you can kind of work it out.
oh
You'd have
wow.
to go and visit it, all this kind of stuff in 2 days, right? It was a lot. Skip forward now, I become a master of that craft, right?
Mm.
And so I can now do what I used to do in 2 days in half a day, right?
I'm like, how?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Again, making complicated things simple. I realized there were certain things that we didn't have to do because the client didn't care about them. There were
Okay.
certain things that were good enough and didn't need to be perfect. There were
Mm,
certain things that, for example, I would go straight to the council and find out what they actually need to be approved and just do that. Like, all things like that.
mhm.
Instead of doing all this other stuff, first come up with something that works and then you can put the fancy stuff around it. And what I
Right.
realized is the client often didn't care about the fancy stuff. So, um, 2 days into half a day. Now, what I could have done is said, I'm finished. Give me more,
Mm,
right? And instead, and there was a couple of moments where I started to do that, and I realized this is not what this is for.
yes.
So instead, what I did is I used the extra day and a half to think. So what I would do is I'd say, okay, what are the processes that we're doing? How are we doing things? How can we do things better? Because when you're in the constant doing mode, you're just churning out like a machine.
Mm,
And what I realize is actually, if I give myself time to think, I can find better ways of doing things. So not only was my resilience improved by perfecting the method I was doing to be able to shorten the time of turnaround, but it also gave me time which I didn't fill with more action.
mhm,
I felt it filled it with more time to think, which made me more valuable to the company, right?
mhm.
And the reason why I'm saying that is going back to the reframe. When we're talking about things of resilience, you mentioned a lot of the stuff about mental and emotional resilience are actually about how we deal with things of the past.
Right.
Some of the things for me, for example, that affected my emotional resilience were realizing the traumas that I had had from childhood were stories of basically a 5-year-old child trying to understand what was happening around him,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Once I realized and I spoke to the people and I realized the story I'd created wasn't the truth,
Mm,
it gave me such relief.
mm,
And it released some of that energy that I've been carrying all this time.
yeah.
And that affected my belief systems. All of a sudden, my beliefs changed because I realized it was on the foundation of something that wasn't real.
Mm,
One of the things I talk about a lot is the difference between truth, two completely different things.
yeah. Yeah.
What is true, what is truth? A good example of that, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about the three truths. What is it? Objective, political, and personal. Objective truth is facts, is data, right? What happened? Everyone can agree because everyone experienced the same thing, right? Personal truth is how I translated that, like how I felt about it, how the story I came away with. And
Mm,
then political truth is something that becomes true over time because it's reinforced,
mhm.
right? And one of the things that's really important about emotional resilience and mental resilience is understanding which of those three we're believing in.
Oh, that's
The moment
interesting.
we can
Okay.
identify that something has become a political truth because it's based on something that just people just said a lot with no data to back it. And it turns out that no one actually experienced it, for example, right? But it's just in our minds, for example, then
Mhm,
that can release us from a lot. The moment we realize it's objective truth, then we can say, okay, cool. If it's objective truth, then how can I look at it in different ways? Okay, So this is a statistic based on this demographic. What do other demographics say? And then what are the statistics that back that up?
Mm.
How can those elements work in this context? Right? So again, it goes into our approach. Again, not stopping in the middle of the tunnel, but getting out the other side. It's not enough to look at what's the problem, but we need to look at what the solution is and what is in our control,
Yeah.
because otherwise we keep spiraling down into these the 12 stages of burnout because we're putting stuff on our shoulders that have no right to be there.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I mean, I could sit here and just listen because you're it's you're peeling things back
Mm,
and I think shining a different type of light on it, which I think is very powerful.
mm,
And really exciting and interesting as well, actually. Definitely.
definitely.
Okay.
And it's interesting again when again, I have to break things down into simple form for me to understand it. So, but when you do break it down to that level, I feel like you're able to take action on something.
Yes. Like they say about the one sometimes like when you want to take an action, it feels like a huge thing. But if you say, well, what's the one small next step? We can do
Yeah,
that. Yeah, we can do that. Okay.
exactly.
I think we'll draw today's interview and discussion to a close with this last question actually. If you could speak to your younger self who was
Mm,
ambitious but unaware of the costs of neglecting resilience and boundaries, what are three things you would tell yourself?
what a powerful question. Do you know that I mentioned joy earlier on. The inner child is so important,
Oh yes, I agree.
so important. And I actually have my screensaver on my phone is a baby picture of myself.
Oh.
I often forget about him a lot.
Mm,
The version of me that was in Sierra Leone and not yet in this new place, completely oblivious to what the future would hold, who I'll become, all this kind of stuff. There was a word you said a minute ago, which has been a really big thing for me, boundaries.
right.
This word took me to therapy. Like
Right.
that was one of the first things I went to therapy for was I was a people pleaser.
Mm,
And I felt like it was my responsibility to make people happy. Everyone else's happiness was my responsibility. And there were lots of reasons for that. Um, and so if I was to have a conversation with my earlier child self, I would tell him what my my therapist told me, which is not your responsibility. Like there's too much for your shoulders to put everyone else's happiness on yours. Maybe another way to look at it is start with yours and others will follow. Because I realized later on, instead of making people happy, if I was happy, it became contagious.
yeah.
And that actually ended up being part of my personality now. People
Mm.
know me for that. Um, Not everyone has, access to the full breadth of my,
Oh, I like that. Boundaries.
yeah,
Yeah.
boundaries.
Okay. Hmm.
And that's another thing I learned. Um, brilliant, brilliant therapist. And he was saying that he asked me to describe what boundaries look like for me. And I described a wall and it was like, okay, cool. Tell me about this wall though. And I was told, it's big, it's thick, it's tall, it's got barbed wire around it, all this kind of stuff. And it was like, oh wow, okay, so what does that mean for you? And then by the end of it, we realized that, okay, it was shielding me from what was going on outside, but it also meant that I couldn't leave.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? And it also meant that it blocked good things from coming into.
Mm,
And so he was like, okay, what else could we create as a boundary, as an image that would allow this exchange between the inner and the outer world?
mhm.
And lots of workshopping, but we got it to a VIP section. So that's my new boundary. It's a velvet rope. So it's not something that people can't come in and out of, but as soon as it's like an internationally known thing, when you see red carpet with a velvet rope, you assume certain whatever's in it is valuable,
Yes.
the VIP, right? And so you treat it with a certain respect. And so for me, that is what my boundary is now. It's not like a wall anymore. You can see through it. You can see exactly what's in it. You could even get a guest invite, right?
I like that analogy.
You know, you can even get a guest invite. But every now and then, I might tap the bouncers on the shoulder and say, "This person's got to go." You know? And so for me, that's the image that I've used that I would share with my younger self to let them know that you are the valuable thing in there that people are
Mm.
actually coming to see. And you don't have to go and be this person for everyone else because just by being you, you're filling that role. So yeah, and it'll be a great conversation with him, I think.
That is so powerful. And I love how you ended that about just by being you.
Mm.
Yeah. Being you, it will be like a magnet to the right type of people and draw
Yeah.
them in. But yeah, I love that analogy. Yeah, you said about the red carpet and the red rope.
Mm. And
Andre.
it took me a long time to get there though. Like I'm just as a close because it was a struggle. Like I don't want anyone to hear this and think it's just like a walk in the park. I had to face my demons to get there.
Yeah.
Because I used to have a real challenge with my self-image. I didn't have a healthy one. And so I got validation from everyone else. And it was actually reversing that and getting the validation from myself to the
Mhm.
point where now, for example, when people ask me how I am, I'll be like, "Oh, fantastic." These days I tell people I'm great. I'm dope at what I do. Like, and it took me a long time to be able to recognize that, but I'm not saying it through arrogance. It's just through evidence, right? I live it.
Absolutely. You're showcasing rather than showing off, as I say, it's about showcasing because you've got the data, the evidence to back it up.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Oh, Andre, honestly, I mean, we could make this double, triple the time, and I'd really enjoy it. And I'm sure that our audience, everyone that's actually joining us today, will agree as well. So, before we draw to a close, if anyone wants to follow you on social media, like, are there any, say, social media profile links you're happy to share? Where could people find out more about you online?
Yeah, sure. So online, my handle is your burnout coach. So YOURBURNOUTCOUCH, sorry. So your burnout coach on TikTok and Instagram.
Mhm.
Or if you want me directly, it's just Andre Bright, ANDRE BRIGHT. And I'm gonna try and keep it with that. So online is yourburnoutcoach.online. And yeah, just get in touch and ask me questions. I put out a lot of simplified information for difficult things. So, and I think by the time this goes live, I'll be doing more lives as well. So, a lot more interaction and things like that. And if you want to work with me, just get in touch. If there's a company you work for where you think they need a burnout coach to be able to come and speak to the team, for example, my mom always says she can only be as happy as her unhappiest child. And I feel like in organizations, teams can only be as functional as their most unfunctioning team member, right? So stress can cause us dysfunction. So a lot of the work I do is looking at not just the individual, but how the individuals work together. So yeah, I'd love to meet you.
Thank you so much, Andre. So, as we draw to a close, thank you so much for a truly inspiring conversation. Yeah, you've really highlighted. I love the synergy in all the different things that you do, which is so unique about the architecture and the dance and the coaching that you actually do, as well as sharing, about the inner work that you've done as well. And I thank you for your generosity in doing that. So, for our listeners today, we will link to Udo Health and Andre's social handles in the show notes so you can actually learn more and start your own journey towards a healthier life, preventing stress and burnout. And if you are already, like in a good place, looking at putting boundaries in place to ensure that you continue to have a stress-free life that does not involve burnout. So until next time, keep leading with purpose, stay curious, and never underestimate the power of your well-being. Thank you for joining us today. See you soon.
Bye, bro.
Across the years, I've not always tried to stick in one area, but I've said, okay, I'm going to be a governor for 4 years to see, the experience of being a governor. I'm going to, work in terms of behavior. or I'm going to understand a bit more about special educational needs and that field. And, more recently going into attendance and children missing in education. So it's just offering me a whole, a whole sort of plethora of ideas and knowledge